Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Mont, and this is my review of Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem. This is not a sponsored review, I bought the game myself. At time of writing I've put around 30 hours into the game. Wolcen, if you're not aware, is an action RPG or Diablo-clone, however you want to put it. Isometric camera, lots of loot, lots of monster obliterating. Fair warning, a lot of this video is going to be talking about issues that are not directly tied to gameplay, because Wolcen has one of the worst launches I've seen in a long time. But let's talk about gameplay first. Wolcen can feel quite fast and fluid, but if you prefer the older, slower paced action RPGs, you'll probably be disappointed because Wolcen is more like, say, Diablo 3. You'll be cruising through zones, dumping out insane numbers and blowing up enemies by the dozen. It's a satisfying game. The feedback from skills is pretty good within the genre. The presentation is definitely up there too. It's a very nice looking game. It's probably the best looking Diablo clone that I've played at time of writing. It has a cool art style that definitely channels a bit of Warhammer here and there. You don't have classes in Wolcen either. You pick an archetype and then develop it how you see fit. Think similar to Dark Souls, where your starting choice just determines your initial equipment and stats for the most part. Developing your character is done by the skills you find in the world. You can buy them from shops, but enemy drops will be your most common source of them. Drops, not shops. Think of them as spell scrolls. Clicking them learns that spell or skill for your character. And then you gain EXP, the skills level up, unlocking modifiers. Example, your fireball might get a modifier that turns it from fire to ice, or makes it have a larger explosion, or shoot 2 fireballs at once. If you're familiar with Diablo, think runes from Diablo 3. Testing out and combining these skill modifiers is fun, especially when combined with the passive system. The Gate of Fate is a large skill tree, and Wolcen is all about rhymes, isn't it? That you can freely rotate and progress through as you see fit. Each tree is themed. For example, you might have one section that's themed after a tank, and has block chance, defense value, and such. A lot of these nodes are just boring things like gain X% more stat, but some are a lot more interesting, and I don't really mind the sort of boring, gain X% more Y, because we also have the skill modifiers that actually do interesting things. If we only had the, gain X% more Y, I would find that very boring, and a lot of games do just have that. And some of the nodes are pretty interesting too, such as the ability to have your damage over time abilities crit, and a lot more complicated and strange abilities that I don't remember off the top of my head. Things like, every time you do this, you will gain a stack of that, which you can then spend to do this or that. There's way too many to go through them all, but there's a lot of interesting ideas in there. It is a nice system, which should enable a lot of inventive and diverse builds. Emphasis on should. Wolcen also has one of the best layered armor or transmog or glamour systems I've seen. Every item you pick up is added to your collection of cosmetics, then you can enable them piece by piece, and also dye them individually. Now of course you can't change you can't be using a sword and change it into a staff cosmetically, but you can change any of your armor into heavy armor or light armor, which is nice. The dye system is very good because you can change each part separately of each armor. So if you have a breastplate with all different sort of components of it, you can dye each individual part of it, which is really nice and you don't see that very often. Sadly, weapons can't be dyed, but maybe in the future. My only complaint about the system is that you have no names for any of the items. For example, I had one-handed sword I'd picked up somewhere, I have no idea where, but when I was looking through my sort of glamours, I realised, oh, I have this giant one-handed sword that's comically big. But I couldn't tell my friends what it was because there's no name there, and I didn't know which one it was that I picked up because I don't look at every one as I pick them up, There's just pictures, no labels. In the future they should patch in something saying what that item actually is, so that you can tell people. And if only that were the biggest problem Wolcen has. See, now I'm going to talk about what a complete buggy mess the game is. Wolcen apparently began development as a mod for Crysis 10 years ago. The game itself has been in early access for several years at least, probably close to 5 if I'm not mistaken. So even for a small team, they've had a very long time to make sure the launch of the game would go smoothly. Right? Not right. We'll go through each problem in turn. Well, not every problem, as otherwise this video would be 4 hours long. For starters though, The game launched, and the servers were completely destroyed for several days. Apparently prior to launch, they had a max population of players in the low thousands, like say 2,000, that suddenly jumped at launch closer to 100,000. So of course that is a huge leap. But when you're planning to run an online game, you have to account for that. Market data, analytic tools exist for that very reason. You can forecast, you can plan, but they didn't. It was poor planning in the sense that there didn't seem to be any plan. So the game launched, and there wasn't actually any playable online for something like 5 days. So just play offline, right? Yeah, the game has an offline mode, but you can't say start the game in offline and then move that character online later, because the two modes are segregated in a bizarre decision to ostensibly combat hackers and modders. It's good that they don't want hackers to be, ruining everyone's fun, because nobody likes a hacker. But surely there's a better way. I myself bought the game to play with friends, so losing the online aspect rendered the game worthless to me. What niggled me on top of that is that the developers didn't pull the game from sale during this period. For starters, you're selling a game and saying it has online multiplayer when it doesn't. Second of all, you're going to get more people buying and hammering the servers whilst you're having issues with them. Third of all, you're selling a broken game and not letting people know it's broken. They didn't say like on the storefront, hey, the online's not working at the moment, we're trying to fix it. They waited for people to buy the game. And a lot of people bought the game, and they were trying to get online for hours, or maybe they got online for a few minutes, like at the very start, but then they couldn't refund because they played for more than 2 hours whilst trying to get in, and it's a mess. I personally feel they should have pulled the game from sale until they fixed it. I think they were just being kind of scummy with how they handled the whole situation, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't sell something that I know is broken, and they shouldn't either. But hey, server issues aside, the next week after the weekend, which, that's not when people want to play a game on the weekend, right? But eventually they got the servers up and running, mostly. I won't dwell on the awful system of setting up a game with friends that feels like it's from 2005, and often requires restarting the game a few times just to get everyone in. Nor will I dwell on the whole, you have to go back to the main menu and relaunch the game when you invite a friend thing, but the game is still completely broken. See, the early access for Wolcen only let people play the first act of the game. Then on release, they gave us 2 more acts, and a bunch of new skills and other things, none of which had been tested by the community. And guess what? Suddenly releasing more than half your game with no testing is a recipe for disaster. At time of writing, me and my friends have been unable to beat the game, because we're stuck in this one dungeon. Are we stuck because it's hard? No. We are stuck because every time we are in this dungeon, the game will eventually crash at some point during it, meaning we need to start over from the beginning. Sometimes we crash one by one, other times we all crash together, so play offline. One of my friends has been playing offline, and he still gets a lot of crashes. Aside from that, we had a big boss battle, and it kept regenerating to full health. At first we were like, is this a mechanic? Are we being stupid? Do we have to kill the boss with a special thing? Do we have to do something? Does she heal when she grabs us? No, it's just a bug. Some mysterious bug where the boss would regain all of her health instantly at random intervals. That was quite frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? The skill tree I mentioned earlier. Probably half of it, at a conservative guess, doesn't work. And even the parts that do work, well, they are worded inconsistently, poorly, and in a misleading manner. So if you grab a skill node that doesn't work and figure it out, you then must spend a resource to respec. And aside from that, the balance of the game is a total farce right now. Oh, you're playing a glass cannon mage who is 100% focused on damage. You're sacrificing all of your defense and going pure offense. How are you enjoying those crits of 2000? Is it worth it, considering you get one-shot by most enemies if they touch you? Don't worry, here comes a sword and shield user who has 5 times your health, can tank amounts of damage that you can't even imagine, and is also critting for like 30 times more than you are doing. Balance is just comically bad right now. And by the time you're reading this, they should have patched it out, because I noticed like they've actually announced that they're going to fix it, but at time of writing, there's basically one skill that you almost have to use because it's outperforming everything else in the game by a huge margin. That's bleeding edge. By the time you're reading this, and watching this rather, it's probably going to be a different skill that's broken, but hey. The game has had a few hotfixes, but can you guess what nodes got adjusted? Well, I can tell you that none of the nodes that were broken in a negative manner got fixed so far. Instead, they hotfixed a few nodes that were beneficially broken, as in a node that gave you a 50 times modifier to damage instead of 0.5, and so on. That really sends a good message, doesn't it? Instead of focusing on the stuff that doesn't work, they're just nerfing the stuff that is too powerful because I don't know why. There's been a bunch of other bugs too, such as my camera teleporting to another player every time I use a specific ability, which isn't jarring at all, by the way. I try and jump on an enemy, my camera yanks itself across the world for like a split second. Or how about teleporting back to town only to find that the town has been replaced with the Abyss? Or consistently witnessing T-posing clones of my character standing around in one area. It is frustrating because Wolcen could be a really cool game. It just wasn't ready for launch. To touch briefly on the story, it's generic sort of action RPG story where you are cool big man and must become cooler bigger man to kill demons. The writing is bizarre, there's nothing very special about it, but the story is just the means by which you keep up the pumping. And I didn't really touch on the game's angel mode, as I've been calling it. I forget what the game calls it. But yes, not far into the game you get the ability to transform into a big super dude that acts like, well, a super mode. A devil trigger. Sadly, this form isn't really well implemented or utilised. It's a cool idea, but it needs a lot of work. It's a shame because it is really cool. And oh, here's one suggestion for the developers who I know are definitely listening to my video. The super meter should be able to be used as it is now, but also directly usable, as in press button to spend 25% or 50% of the meter to do a single strong attack, such as, say, the Infinity Big Beam attack. Just an idea, something you can use as like a screen clearer in certain situations. But yeah, Wolcen has potential, although it's sad to see how much they cut out from earlier builds of the game, which were evidently too ambitious. Hopefully that was the case. It was, we're too ambitious. It wasn't a case of let's cut it and sell it back later in the DLC or an expansion. That might sound pessimistic, but honestly the way the developers have been handling it so far has kind of not been great in my opinion. They've not got a lot of goodwill from me. Hopefully they can win it back in the coming weeks and months by improving the game. We'll see. The game just simply wasn't ready to be launched. It's broken, buggy, and headache-inducing at the moment. Maybe wait a couple of months and then pick it up if you're interested in it. As for endgame content, I hear Wolcen has it, but I can't talk about it because I can't reach it because we're stuck in this dungeon that keeps on crashing. Oh, one final point. It feels really bad that you can't cancel actions with rolls and you can't use potions during other actions. Sometimes it makes the game, which is otherwise quite fluid and dynamic feeling, develop a sense of clunkiness that is not becoming at all. The dodgy hitboxes for attacks and click boxes for items don't help with that either. If the footage in this video has caught your interest, though, keep an eye on Wolcen and pick it up in the future, if the developers continue to improve the game and polish it to the state it should have been launched at. Right now, still feels like early access. Until next time though, you guys take care. Ciao.